So welcome to the first in a series of 3 webinars. This webinar is about stress and resilience. My name's Penny Wilmot and my colleague Lucy Attenborough is also here. We are psychologists who work with the adult congenital heart disease team at the Freeman Hospital. So this webinar is going to last around 45 minutes, though I haven't actually timed it, so it will be interesting to see how long it's going to last. There will be time for questions at the end, and if you have any questions during, you can use the chat function and we'll keep an eye on it and answer any questions as we go along. Well, we'll try to anyway. We will be using Mentimeter, which is a little thing that helps people be interactive in the session. And I'll go on it as well, and Lucy can go on it, and Terry can go on it maybe, so we can all go on it. And I'll explain that as we go. So this can be accessed through your mobile phone. So Lauren, it depends. Or actually, I don't want to say, yeah. So it depends whether you're able to access that separately on your mobile phone or not. So otherwise, just try and make sure your mobile phone doesn't interrupt the session. So if you need to take a call or something, go on mute, etc. So I was going to say there that we were hoping to record the session. We've already said that this is being recorded, and it should mainly capture the presentation screen, and people shouldn't be able to be seen in the recording, and people can stay on mute if they don't want to be heard, and do everything through the chat. Oops, I'm trying to do things on both. Yes, here we go. So today's aims, I'm going to be talking about or helping people understand what stress is, help people identify how you think about stress and why that might be important. And we're going to talk about learning to harness stress to achieve the things that are important to you. Okay. So now in a minute, we're going to test out Mentimeter. So this is going to be fun because I've got to try and work out how to share my screen separately. So this is good. So we're going to think about what we think about stress. Okay. So I'm going to see if this works. Oh, actually, so if people go on to, there we go. If you pause with me while I work out how to do this. Present. Oh, we're at the back, so. As you can see, we're working out how to do this. So what I want you to do is, if people have the chance on their phone, if you go to menti.com up the top there and just use the code 3304008. I'm doing it as well.
I don't think I can get on it while I'm on this.
Yes, that's quite possible. That's quite possible. So yeah, never mind. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Do you want me? I've got a notepad. I can write it down.
Well, why don't you? If you want to put anything in, why don't you pop it in the chat, and somebody else can put it into Mentimeter for you.
Okay.
So either Terry or Lucy.
Yeah, yeah, I can do that, Penny, if you want.
And watch the chat and put any of the responses into Mentimeter. So actually, what we're going to do is maybe skip this, because I think this slide is going to work better with quite a few people. So we're going to move on to what comes to mind when you hear the word stress. So you can put in or put onto chat any words that come to mind when you hear the word stress.
I don't think the chat's working.
Ah,
Oh no, it's working now.
okay.
Yeah, I can see you typing now, Lauren.
Yeah. I'm trying. Lucy, have you managed to get onto Mentimeter?
Yes, there's been a bit of a faff, but it's getting there.
Yeah. So this may or may not work, and now the dog wants to join in. I'm just thinking maybe when we've done this, we might come out of Mentimeter because it works better when we've got lots of people. Okay, brilliant. So we've just got a few things there. Brain like a pinball, anxious, scary, presentations, work, can't concentrate. Brilliant. So what types of situations? So in a similar way, let's give it a go with just, one more thing here. What types of situation maybe make you feel stressed? Oh, hang on. Not letting me go forward in mine.
Oh, it's a bit of a poop, honestly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's moved forward on the Mentimeter on mine.
Yeah.
So I can put them in.
I'm having a drama with it, back and forth. It's saying, please wait for the presenter to show the next slide, but it's not showing me.
Mine's gone on to the next slide.
Oh, here we are.
Yeah, give it a go. I'm going blank.
Yeah, I know. I was, but now it's coming.
So we've got some here. We've got work, strange city, being on my own, giving a presentation, difficult. I think that was me. Right. Before we spend most of the time trying to figure this out, what I think I'm going to do is stop sharing this.
Oh, hang on, just a minute.
And I'm going to go back to the presentation, hopefully, so I don't bore everyone to death. Try again in Teams. Yeah, present. And yes, that works better when we got lots of people. Zoom. So that's kind of enough of the trying to be interactive, I think. So many messages that we see are about the dangers of stress, telling us to avoid stress, telling us to beat stress, and telling us to fight stress. You've probably seen this on social media or in the media. We hear about how stress is bad for our health or bad for us in general, but is this actually correct? Is this the whole story? Today, I'm going to talk about a different way of looking at it and understanding stress. But firstly, before I do that, I'm just going to explain why we think it's bad for us. So the research that led to the conclusion that stress is bad for us and should be avoided was actually done in about the 1930s, so a really long time ago. In fact, not far off 100 years ago. And it involved animals. and it involved subjecting animals to situations such as receiving unpredictable shocks, electric shocks, or being thrown into a bucket of water and being made to swim until they nearly drown. So as you can imagine, experiences like that's not really very good for you. Surprise, surprise. And there's plenty of evidence that abusive and torture experiences are really bad for us. But actually, that's not really stress. That's not really what we're talking about today. In a way, this is kind of like the Hunger Games for rodents. It's not actually stress and what we experience in our everyday experience of stress. So even things that feel really bad and difficult, the evidence out there tells a bit of a different story, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So, is stress really bad for us? In 1998, so nearly 25 years ago, 30,000 adults in the US were asked about how much stress they'd experienced in the last year, and were also asked, do you believe stress is harmful to your health? And 8 years later, the researchers looked to see who of the 30,000 people had died. That's kind of how they do this type of research, which may sound rather strange, but that's how they find out how things are whether things are bad for you or not. So what did they find? Well, they found that people who'd had high levels of stress the previous year did have a 43% chance, greater chance of dying. But this was only true if they believed stress was harmful for them. If they believed that stress was not harmful, they didn't have any higher risk of death. And in fact, their risk was even lower or the same as people who didn't have any stress in their life, didn't have much stress at all in the last year. So that's quite surprising, that stress is bad for you only if you think it's bad for you, and that actually it doesn't have to be bad for you if you don't think it's bad for you. So that was quite surprising. And actually, since that time, they've done hundreds of studies and they've all supported this idea. So before we go any further, let's think about what stress actually is. So it's become a word that can mean almost anything that we don't want to experience and everything that's wrong with the world. So it can mean anything from traffic jams and delays to pressure at work to things like a death in the family. We say we feel stressed when we feel a range of things like anxious, busy, frustrated, threatened, under pressure, and that some of those things were coming through a little bit in the Mentimeter. And if we had more people here, then we'd probably get a load of those things coming through. And today in this webinar, talking about stress, we kind of mean all of those things. But also, and most importantly, stress is what arises. So stress is what happens and what you feel when something you care about is at stake. We're not very likely to get stressed about something we really don't care about. So if somebody said Joe Bloggs in another city was having a difficult day, you probably wouldn't be that stressed about it. But if it was somebody you knew and cared about, you might feel more stressed about that. So it's something that happens when something important is at stake. So stress and meaning are very closely linked. People don't tend to stress out about things they don't care about. And you can't create a meaningful life without experiencing some stress. So, can stress be helpful? Do we always want to get rid of stress? So there's a lot of emphasis on being relaxed, chilled, calm, and that can be a good thing. It feels quite nice. But maybe there are times when it's not so helpful. And actually, sometimes being calm isn't very easy either. So what would athletes be like if they were completely calm and chilled in competition? The Lionesses in the World Cup final, the rugby team in the World Cup, athletes in a race. Would it really be helpful if they were really chilled and calm? Or do they need something there? What about firefighters? If they're going in to rescue someone from a burning building, do you really want them to be chilled and calm? Well, yes, to a certain extent, but they've also got to be hyped up enough to come and actually rescue you. Otherwise, they might be just lying down, having a chill in the back of the fire engine. They need to be hyped up in some kind of a way. So in some ways, stress can be thought of as that time when we're hyped up to achieve something important. And it can help us to achieve that. This is a big part of what we're going to talk about tonight. So what we're going to talk about from the science of stress is how stress can help us with survival. Stress can help by giving us energy and resources to meet a challenge. Stress can help us connect with other people. And stress can help with growth and learning. So firstly, scary picture here. I wanted to get a saber-toothed tiger, but there weren't any good pictures of saber-toothed tigers, so we'll have to just deal with having a tiger instead. So our bodies and minds have developed a survival system that helped our ancestors survive when they came across dangerous situations. For example, right back to times when people lived in caves and faced creatures like saber-toothed tigers. When faced with danger, our body will trigger a range of changes in order to help us survive. So what would need to happen here if we come across this tiger? Well, we'd need to be able to escape if we're far enough away and we can get away, or we might need to fight. So our body gets us ready to do that. It's very clever like that. Our heart will beat faster to pump more blood around the body. Oops, Lucy?
Sorry to interrupt, but is everybody seeing the different slides that Penny's showing? Because my slides are not going.
Right,
forward.
You might have to. I've tried to. Hang on a sec. I will try and. Because there is a thing where you have to advance them, so it should be a picture of a tiger. Who's got a Who's got a picture of a tiger? Yeah.
I've put the tiger on now. Yeah.
Okay. So I did try to have it so that I was advancing it, but sometimes that goes a little bit few width, as we discovered.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Just
sorry about that.
Move them on as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I was when I did it earlier. It was moving on for other people, but yeah, I might have accidentally hit a setting. So anyway, if we're getting ready to run away or to fight this tiger, our heart's going to beat faster to pump more blood around. We're going to breathe faster to get more oxygen in our body. Our muscles are going to tense up, ready to act. Digestion is going to slow down to conserve energy. We might start to sweat, getting ready to cool our muscles down. So all of these things happen very quickly and automatically in dangerous situations and help us be more likely to survive. Okay. And if you move on to the next slide, hang on, if you don't see it move on yourself. So it should say fight or flight. So this response is called the fight or flight response. It gets our body ready to either fight or run away. And for many years, we've been told that this is the reaction our body has to stress. And as you can imagine, it's very helpful if we're trying to run away from a tiger, but it's not so helpful in normal everyday situations, especially if it's likely to make us avoid things, which is the flight or run away, or attack, take it out on other people, which might be the fight response. Okay, so I'm going to move it forward. So you should see a slide that says, what other ways can stress help us? So what we found out is this isn't the only way that stress can help us. We don't need to face tigers in our day-to-day lives for stress to be able to help us cope. We now know that stressful situations can trigger a range of other body changes that can be helpful and can help prepare us for difficult situations. So the next slide, if it hasn't already gone, should say challenge response. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is our challenge response. This is very similar to the fight-flight response, and it may feel a bit the same in many ways. This is the response that is activated when we're faced with a challenge. so long as we're not thinking about it as a dangerous survival situation. So think about the Lionesses in the World Cup final, the athlete competing in a competition and rescuer saving someone's life. These people's bodies are preparing them for the challenge of getting through it and performing as best they can. And it can result in our hearts beating faster, our breathing changing, but there's slight differences from the fight-flight. So additional chemicals are released that keep our blood system more relaxed, meaning that our blood pressure is not increasing and our brain is working faster than normal to help us do what we need to do. These changes prepare our bodies and minds to handle difficult situations. So examples of this might be when we have exams, if we've got a job interview, taking part in sports competition, taking on a physical challenge, solving problems, dealing with a difficult situation in the family, or even playing computer games where we've got to work out what to do. Okay. So we're moving on again. So if it hasn't moved on, you can move on. The next response is befriend and connect response. So if we allow ourselves to, our body's stress response can also trigger a desire to be around other people or to ask for help and get the help we need, and also to help other people. It can also help us feel part of a wider community, think of that sense that we're all in it together. This response can increase the amount of oxytocin in our bodies, which is a bonding chemical, or sometimes called the love or cuddle hormone. And it can also protect our bodies and help us do what we need to do, alongside helping us connect with other people. So again, think about people who are in, hold on a sec, the dog is whinging. So think about people who are in difficult situations who try to help other people. You see lots of stories about this on television, on the radio, in the papers, or on social media. And also think about people who are able to get others to help them, to ask for help. So until recently, this one shocked me actually, till recently, more than 90% of all the research studies on stress was only conducted on men. And in animals, just male animals. So, and then they wonder why fight or flight is the main response that they came up with. So when they started looking and widening it out, there is actually a really social side of stress, especially in women, but actually for everybody. Stress can increase caring, cooperation, and compassion. Under stress, they found that women can show an increase in tending, which is caring for others, and befriending, which is increasing social ties, for example, listening, spending time together, and providing emotional support. So research into this quickly expanded to include men, and they found that they also can get some of those responses and an instinct to protect other people. And hold on a sec, the dog wants to go out. So just pause. Sorry about that. He'll come in a minute. So I've lost my place. So yes, in times of stress, all people can be shown to become, or have the potential to become, more trusting, generous, and willing to risk their own well-being to protect others. So stress doesn't always make us kinder. Obviously, it can make us angry and defensive. When fight or flight kicks in, we become more aggressive and withdrawn. Fight or flight again, either running away from it or getting annoyed at people. But stress can, and often does, make people more social and caring. And how you think about stress can determine how you respond. So, hold on a sec. Leave the door open. Then the third type of reaction we have to stress is something called growth. When we go through stressful times in our lives, even though it all feels really negative, there is always the possibility of some positive effects. So take a moment to think of a time in your life that was a period of significant personal growth. So maybe a turning point that led to positive changes in your life, or a newfound purpose. Or if you can't think of one for yourself, think about a character in a movie or a book, a time when the character experienced a sort of change and newfound purpose, or learned something new about themselves. And when you think of that, think about this. Would you also describe this time as stressful? So actually, a lot of the time when we go through something that gives us some kind of new learning or newfound purpose, those are actually the stressful times in our lives. My example is actually linked to the dog out there. I got my dog when it was the second lockdown as a puppy, and it was the most incredibly stressful time of my life. He was a very difficult puppy, really hard to look after, and it was really, really hard. But now I've learned so much about looking after dogs. Our bond has changed and grown over time, and obviously I wouldn't be without him. It also eventually did bring in the tend and befriend. I managed to ask for help, and it was really helpful to kind of connect with other people who were going through similar things. I discovered a whole load of people out there who also found having a puppy very, very difficult. And that was really helpful, knowing that I wasn't alone. So that's my example. But even if we prefer to have a fewer stressful times in our lives, it is the stressful times that give rise to growth, whether that's new learning, new purpose, new experiences. And these are the things that often make our life meaningful. So this idea isn't new. Think of the phrase, hopefully you can see that coming up there, because if not, press advance. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So this is
My
something
mum said.
your mum said that. Yes, I'm sure my mum and my grandmother and other kind of people have always said those things. Absolutely. But what does that actually mean? So the next slide should just say growth again. So hopefully you can see that. And basically research shows that choosing to see this side of stress can help you learn and grow. This is something called a growth mindset. So this isn't saying we should look for or chase really stressful or awful events, but when they happen, there are positives as well as the negative. So think of examples such as failing an exam, which might lead to seeking support and finding ways to learn that could lead to better skills and new opportunities, or maybe not getting a job and finding ways to look at a new or different path that could actually lead to something better. I'm just going to close the door. Shall we go and sit down? Go sit down. Yes. Even terrible things that we never choose to go through, such as, like people watching this, ill health, even if we would never choose it to happen. Sometimes we can meet people we might never have met otherwise, or learn things about ourselves that we would never have learned otherwise. So a psychologist in the United States looked at this and discovered that there's a coping style called shift and persist. I'd not heard of this until I read about it the other day. And what this means is, so shifting is a strategy which is about both accepting stress and changing the way you think about it. So, for example, thinking about the things I can learn from a situation, or about something good that can come from it. And persisting is about keeping up that optimism that things can get better in the future, or that, I can learn things from this. And so people who took that approach, even though they lived really difficult lives and had really, really difficult childhoods, they didn't get the same negative effect that typically result from growing up in very adverse circumstances. And actually,
I think I struggle with the persist.
yes,
Part of thinking that it's going to be okay.
I think absolutely, it's all of these things, these are all ideas, but it doesn't mean that suddenly they're easy to do. It's just starting to think of things in a different way, but absolutely. And the good news is that over time, we can all start to practice these things, and we can learn and practice a different way to think about things. And actually, that's what we're going to talk about in a minute. So the next one, choose to find an upside. Again, not easy. People struggle with this. But again, people who've gone through difficult things and have found ways to cope tend to be able to eventually, when they're looking back, they can maybe find a sense of personal strength. I got through that, even though it was really tough. Maybe an increased appreciation of life. Actually, you know, that was really difficult, but actually it makes me appreciate the really little things. I've seen that when I've seen people on the wards in the hospital and they've been really, really poorly and haven't been able to eat anything. And then sometimes when they have that cup of tea for the first time, they really appreciate that ability, you know, the small things that they've just not really realized before. And then they can take that newfound appreciation into their life and think, gosh, yes, remember when I couldn't have a cup of tea.
I've been struggling like with obviously the heart condition and walking and that, and one day I was like, this year I'm gonna see the sunrise. I don't care
Yeah.
is, or you know, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna go and see it with me dog, and I'm gonna walk there and I'm gonna go and see it. And I seen it, and it was the most beautiful sunrise, and I felt so appreciated that I got up and I did it, even though I was panting and like breath and everything. I still did. And like the overwhelming emotions and everything came over, and I was like, I just did that.
So what you've described there is a kind of challenge mindset, isn't it? To, you know, it's something that's really tricky, but you took on the challenge and you gave it a go and you achieved it. And then you were able to really appreciate something really special. And that's something to, you know, and then you can learn, hang on, I did that. So I can find something in me that could do something like that again.
Yeah, it's that bit, it's that part that I'm struggling with. Like after I had a challenge or something, or I feel something, the next challenge seems like 10 times worse.
Absolutely. So it's learning a different way of thinking, that learning to trust ourselves, learning to know that we can do it again, even though it feels scary and difficult. Absolutely. So I'm actually just going to skip on to the next bit, because I think in a way the next bit's the most important. So what we're going to talk about here is how we harness stress, how we use it, how we cope with it in a different way. So there's a 3-step thing I'm going to talk about here. The first bit, and we'll talk about all of these steps, is learning to acknowledge stress. And I'll tell you why when we get on to that. The second bit sounds really weird, and it is American. It does come from an American course, but welcome and recognise. But I'm going to talk about why and what that actually means, but it does sound a bit strange, especially to us Brits. And the third one is making use of the energy that comes with it. And energy might mean different things to different people, but we're going to go through these steps and think of a different way of approaching stressful situations. So firstly, acknowledge. The first step to harnessing stress is to acknowledge it. But what does this mean? Well, the first step is just to ask yourself some questions. So firstly, what is stressing you right now? Just naming it. For me, doing a presentation and having a dog whinging at me. Number 2, what are your typical emotional responses? So this might be things like frustration, sadness, wanting to get rid of stress, you know, feeling uncomfortable, feeling scared, maybe, all kinds of different feelings we might have. What are your typical behavioural responses? So this might be, what actions do you take, or inaction? For example, arguing, eating, avoidance, rising to the challenge. There may be a range of different things we do. And what are your typical body responses? What sensations and changes occur in your body? For example, tiredness, pounding heart, or stomach ache, or other things. I get sort of tension up in my shoulders, and I sometimes get a headache. So when you are stressed, we process that stress in the middle of our brain in an area called the limbic center, which deals with emotion, and the amygdala, which deals with fear. And all of this can set up that fight or flight response that we were talking about, where we try to escape the situation or attack or take it out on other people. But when you write down and verbalize the ways that you are feeling, and just go through those questions, you're starting to move the processing of the stress into the front of our brain, which is the more advanced part of our brain, which can bring us more reason, logic, empathy, self-control. And this allows us to step back a little bit from our stress and start to think, how am I going to respond to it? So that very first step of just noticing and just naming in our heads, even if we're just saying to ourselves, I feel stressed right now and I can feel it in my body, and I know that I just want to run away. Just by starting to name those things in your head, you're shifting away from that fight or flight. And it gives you a bit of space to think about it. So maybe over the next few days, you could pay attention to your levels of stress. And as soon as you notice your stress, don't avoid it, but simply acknowledge, oh, I'm stressed now. Just naming it and just noticing what comes up, the feelings, the thoughts, the urges of what you want to do. That's the first step, acknowledge. The second step, the strange sounding one, welcome and recognize. Who wants to welcome and recognize stress? Well, we are more likely to feel stress in relation to the things that we care about, as we said earlier. So thinking about our values and what's important to us helps us to cope with that stress. So I'm trying to think of a good example. I'd written down a few, but I'm trying to think of a good relevant example. So if somebody might be thinking of doing something really difficult, but for something or someone they care about, I was just thinking about, there's a lot of stuff for children in need. There's lots of stuff coming up with people doing fundraising stuff and doing kind of big physical challenges and stuff. So if people are doing that for a purpose that's really important to them, they're more likely to manage it and to feel more able to do it. So it's almost a kind of bring it on kind of mindset here. Bring it on, I can deal with it. So another example I'd written down is somebody who was doing lots of, and which isn't necessarily so relevant to a lot of people. People might not be able to sort of connect with this so much, but if somebody's doing a lot of really hard physical exercise as part of army training, if they're thinking, I'm doing it because I want to get fitter and I want to get better at this, and I'm doing it for the people in my team, and bring it on, yeah, we can do it, that is actually going to make it far easier for them to do it. There'll be plenty of other situations. So even for other things, just things like thinking about what's most important, like I want to be there for my family, or to be able to go out and about and explore places I find interesting and find ways to approach the challenges of going through treatment or dealing with symptoms. So thinking about what's important and why you're doing it, that can sometimes help to give you that sense of bring it on, I can do this. So this is kind of bringing in that optimism. It's trying to bring in that I'm doing it for that reason. When you're doing it for a reason of something that's important, it brings that extra courage to us so that we can start to do things, even if we're not sure we can do it. It's okay to not be quite sure. We can have a go at doing it anyway. So take a moment and think about what you're currently stressed about, and maybe try and complete the sentence, I'm stressed about this because I care about. So underneath the things that are really stressing us out, there's something we care about. So thinking of a random dog example, when I go to the park with my dog and his behaviour's all over the place and I'm a bit worried that he's going to run up to another dog uninvited, I suppose it's because I care about him and his well-being, but also not frightening other people and caring about other people's dogs and their well-being. So that's kind of a little bit stressful sometimes because I want things to go well and those interactions to be good.
I feel that with people, like,
Yeah.
if, how can I put it? If, like, my close friends say, like, I'm really stressed about this, I'm unwell, like, I try and want to, like, fix and help.
Yeah.
But then they don't listen, and then I'm like, oh, they're not listening, so what have I done? And then, oh, it gets us all stressed.
Yes. So there's something about you're getting stressed about it because the thing that means a lot to you is helping other people and the people that you care about. And then it's about figuring out, is what I'm doing the right, is there a different way I can try this? Is there something else that's going to work better? So we'll come on to that bit next.
Me Nana always says, like, Lauren, try not to get too involved and, like, into other people's things. And I'm like, I think it's just the way I am. Like, I want to help.
Well, I think an awful lot of people.
If it's like a reflection of what you want to feel too. Like, you want people to feel that same way with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Want people to care too.
And I think that's something that probably a lot of people are going to identify with, that actually something that's really important with them is being caring towards other people. And if you think back to what we were talking about tend and befriend, one thing we know is that by trying to help other people and doing things, for other people, as well as being able to connect with them and getting support from them too, those things can actually help us manage stress and also change the way our body reacts to stress, so that even if we feel stressed, it's actually not having the same negative effects on our body and our mind. We're less likely to become depressed and all of those different things. So the third step is making use of the energy. So thinking back to what we were talking about before about our typical response, so acknowledging the stress, how do I feel stressed? What do I think about? How do I feel? How do I react? How does it feel in my body? And then that answer to what's important, what's the thing behind it, what's the value behind it that's making it feel stressful. The next thing is to think, are my typical responses to stress helping me or harming me in my pursuit of the things that are important to me? So what changes can I make? Can I do it slightly different? Sometimes a change might be, do I need to take 3 deep breaths to calm myself down so I can think this through better? Or, think of a different way to do it. Maybe it means telling myself that my stress means I'm excited and ready for a challenge, up for it, that kind of bring it on mentality rather than scared and unprepared. That was probably me before I started doing this presentation. Bring it on, we can do it. And what new opportunities or insights does experiencing the stress give you? So some examples might be stressful interactions with friends or family might help us to learn how to communicate better, or to learn to listen, or work out what they need or what you need in that conversation. So finding a slightly different way around doing it. An argument with a partner might be an opportunity to learn more about that other person's wants and needs. Failing an exam might be an opportunity to learn, where did I go wrong? What do I need to learn in order to do this better? So it's So if we're thinking of the 3 steps, it's acknowledging that we're stressed and how we feel it, which starts to get us more into thinking mode than sort of panic, sort of fight or flight mode. Recognizing what's important under there and the real reasons why we're approaching this situation. And then making use of that energy, working out what do I, what's the approach I need? Do I want to approach this as a challenge, see it as a challenge, bring it on, I'm going to do it. It's going to feel scary, but I can do it. Is it going to be, I need to reach out to other people and get some extra support, have someone else holding my hand along the way? Is it going to be...
What if you're struggling to know why you're stressed? What if you make it you can't connect that? What happens then?
That can be a challenge to learn those things, can't it? And one of the things in this series of webinars, the next one we're going to have is about anxiety. So sometimes people can get stuck in that fight or flight thing. And so our next webinar is about, if you're getting stuck in the fight or flight bit, then there'll be a few hints and tips as to what to do to calm all of that down. So that'll be Lucy in the next webinar. Okay. So just to finish off, I was going to finish off with a quote. Now, all of this that I've been speaking about has come from, and I can make sure people have links to the resources that I got a lot of this information from if people are interested. So remember, this is about dealing with stress. And next time we're going to be talking about anxiety, and then the time after that we'll be talking about low mood. But I just quite like this, chasing meaning. So things that are meaningful, which might be connecting with other people or helping other people, or it might be something else. Chasing meaning is better for your health than avoiding discomfort. And we've got to learn to trust ourselves to handle the stress that follows. And that's the tricky bit, as you said. It's not easy to do that. It takes practice and time. And it might be about learning ways to come out of the fight or flight as well, which is more the anxiety side of things. So all of this stuff, because we're coming up to the end of time, is about, I've got loads of things to say on this slide, and I'm not going to read them all out because they don't necessarily make much sense. But it's all about practice and mindset. We can practice new ways to think about stress in our lives. It will feel hard at first. Remember, this actually isn't about feeling less stressed necessarily, all of this. It's about learning that feeling stressed isn't dangerous and becoming less scared of feeling stressed and finding a different way of thinking about it. That takes time and practice. So it will feel hard at first. And learning new skills usually does feel hard at first. And the good news is that in the many research studies that have been done looking at stress mindsets, being told some of the information in this webinar, just being told it, can already help people to change the way their bodies and minds respond to stress. So in a lot of the research, they actually just gave people a 3-minute video to watch. And just watching that video made them deal better with stress when they were tested in, oh, you don't even want to think about some of the scary things they make them do in some of these research studies. Have an interview in front of a panel of experts who are then just going to give you negative feedback about all the things that you're doing wrong, is one common method that they use. So even just learning a few of these things made people still feel stressed, but handle it so much better. And it had less impact on their physical health, even though they still felt stress. So I think one of the messages here is we can change how we think about stress. We can maybe become less scared of being stressed and think about maybe harnessing some of those mindsets, like, can I see it as a challenge? What can I learn from it? Who can I reach out to, and can I help other people? And just doing any of those little things can change the way stress affects our body from something that's hard on our body to something that actually is, it doesn't have that same negative effect and actually can help us be healthy and help us perform better. So all of the information here, and I'm going to see if I can, I'm going to stop. This is the interesting thing. Stop sharing, stop presenting. Because what I can show people is, and in fact, maybe when we've worked out how we can edit the, okay, computer, how do I stop sharing? Right, yep, excellent, perfect. So we can try and find a way of sharing. Some of that information came from a book by the lady who made that quote, called Kelly McGonigal. So it's a book called The Upside of Stress. It's quite readable, actually, and it gives you all this kind of information about how stress is different from what we thought. And some of it also came from an online course, that's a free online course. Amazing that you can get free things. I was just going to see if I can show it to people. So let's have a look. Here we go. Computer. Can you see that? So there's a website called sparktools.org /rethinking stress. But actually, if you just Google Spark Tools, that's SPARQ tools, it's Stanford University in America, and Rethink Stress, you can actually find this course, and it has all the different steps on stress, why it's maybe not as bad for you as people think, lots of videos that they've used in the research, and all of those questions like think about what's stressing you, and that's where I got some of the stuff. But this is the intervention they use in a lot of the research. This is the stuff that they've shown can help people in all situations, at all levels of severity of stress. It's had pretty good evidence, and it's got, as you can see, yeah, my computer's not connecting properly, but it's free and people can access it and they can work through it. So that's got lots of information as well as the book. And as I said, our next webinar, and I'm going to try and come off sharing, our next webinar is going to be about anxiety and coping with anxiety, and that's particularly if people then get stuck in the fight or flight anxious part of reactions to things. So hopefully that will have some hints and tips as well about calming down. All of that.
Will I get a